An Israeli official is indicating negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza could go into effect next week. Indirect talks between Israel and Hamas are happening for a second day in Qatar, but there are still some sticking points, like whether the war will resume after the 60-day truce. ABC News chief international correspondent James Longman has the latest. Hi, James.
Hi, Dan. Yeah, we're still waiting for news out of Doha. The ceasefire negotiations ongoing between Hamas and Israel. These are indirect talks ongoing. But an Israeli official has spoken to ABC News quite bullish about the process so far, saying they're 80 to 90% of the way there. And we're hearing now that Steve Witkoff, who's the US Special Envoy to the Middle East, he's on his way to Doha. For him to be appearing at this stage would suggest perhaps that they're quite a long way through the process. Someone at his level perhaps wouldn't be there for the earlier conversation, so we'll see. But it remains the case that there are these big sticking points that have hindered every one of the ceasefires that have been negotiated through this conflict, namely the idea that at the end of the period, on this occasion they're talking about a 60-day pause in the fight, there'd be a permanent peace, and that the IDF would completely withdraw from the Strip. That is something that Netanyahu's coalition partners here in Israel are adamant that they do not want to see happen. So we'll have to wait and see if an announcement does indeed come this week, perhaps through the weekend into next week. Relatedly, though, another headline which is hitting at the moment is from the Israeli Defense Minister here, Israel Katz, who has once again raised the possibility of forcibly displacing Palestinians in Gaza. He's talking about the idea of what he's calling a humanitarian city being built on the rubble of Rafah in the south of Gaza, where he said 600,000 Palestinians would be moved to. They would not be able to leave that location. He also talks about envisaging the rest of the entire population of Gaza, that's more than 2 million people, to go through a similar process. And eventually what they'd be then able to do would be to emigrate voluntarily. That's the phrase he used. But that is an absolute non-starter for just about everybody in this region looking on, the Arab partners most notably, who would need to help in that process, because that's what both the Trump administration and the Israeli government have spoken about in the past, the idea that Palestinians could go and live in neighboring Arab countries. This is forced displacement. This is essentially ethnic cleansing, and it is, as far as the Arab countries in this region are concerned, a complete non-starter. But it speaks to the issue of the ceasefire, because this is about the day after the war. What happens next? And for that to be raised as a possibility for the day after means that Hamas feels, well, what do we do after this 60-day ceasefire? And that's where often these talks, it seems, do hit a concrete wall. But for the moment, we're waiting to see whether or not a ceasefire will be announced. But in just the last 24 hours, we're told 100 Palestinians have been killed in the Gaza Strip. There has not been any let up there. Diane.
All right, Chief International Correspondent James Longman, thank you.